In the season of Advent, John the Baptist becomes a very prominent figure, especially in the second and third Sundays of Advent in the readings that we get, because he really stands in the midst of salvation history, bringing to closure that which went before and pointing to that which will come. And so, like the other prophets of the Old Testament, John speaks on behalf of God, calling the people and announcing God's presence. However, there's a big difference between John and any of the preceding prophets of the Old Testament, because the Old Testament prophets would point to the coming of God, but it was way out there somewhere. They would talk about and point to the time when everything was wonderful. Isaiah, the author of our first reading today, was great for that. In incredible poetry, he would talk about what things would be like when the Lord came. But you see, John the Baptist is different. He doesn't say what things are going to be like out there. He says, he's here now. Pay attention. He is among you. He's here, and I'm not worthy to untie the strap of his sandal. So no longer looking way out there somewhere, but look around you and you will see him. And so John is causing quite a stir among the people. I mean, he's dressed up in camel hair and all that stuff. He looks like Elijah. And Elijah was a prophet who many of the Jews believed would have to return to earth, because tradition says that he took off in a fiery chariot. And so many Jews believed that Elijah would come back to announce the coming of the Messiah. And so they looked at John and they saw somebody, could be Elijah, I don't know, he's dressed funny, eats locusts. Of course, if you think that's funny, they probably would have think funny that we eat pork rinds, I don't know, but John is out there in the desert doing this stuff on the bank of the Jordan at a crossroads. And that's where he sets up bank in what today would be the West Bank of Israel. And so when the priests and the Levites come out to him, when they get wind of this, they go out there to see exactly what's going on. And they come to John with their clipboards and their pens, trying to see if he checks off all the boxes, if he is who he claims to be and who he claims to be and what he's doing. They want all the information to bring it back to the chief priests in Jerusalem. And so they ask him, who are you? And why are you doing what you're doing? And John is very clear. Nothing ambivalent about John the Baptist. John says, I am not the Christ. I am not Elijah. I am not the prophet. But rather, what I am is a voice crying out in the desert, make straight the way of the Lord. Now, to understand what John told them, it's helpful to understand a little bit about the roads in first century Palestine. They weren't paved, first of all. They were sand, they were rock. When rains would come, like here, when we get rains, it seems to flood very quickly. Well, there they would flood out, they would change the contour of the roads. And so whenever a king was planning to visit a particular part of his realm, he would send out an advance person who would go out to wherever the king was going to visit. And one of the things he would tell them is what they needed to do to get ready to receive the king. And always the first thing was, make straight the way for the king. In other words, level it out. Make sure the king can get here without too many potholes. And then they would also tell them what they needed to do in order to prepare for the king, what the etiquette was. Because these were common people. They weren't used to the king's court and all the finery. And so this advance man would tell them to prepare the way, make something available so that the king can get there without any discomfort. And then he would tell them what they should do in order to welcome him. And so John the Baptist, is exactly the advance man for Christ. He does exactly what a king's advance person would do. He tells them, make straight the way of the Lord. Prepare a path. Prepare the way before him. John is simply doing what any king's advance person would do. He's telling them what they need to do to get ready, what they need to do to be prepared to receive the Lord. And that is turn away from your sins and be baptized. Now, that is clearly what the church is telling us during this time of Advent, this third Sunday. The church is telling us, rejoice. This is what we call Gaudete Sunday. We rejoice because the coming of Christ is ever nearer. Rejoice, for the Lord is coming, but prepare yourselves so that you can truly welcome him into your hearts and into your lives. And so, what do you need to do? We've only got 1 week left. A week from today is Christmas Eve. So what do we need to do in order to prepare ourselves to welcome Christ into our lives? The Lord is coming, whether you're ready or not, but it won't do us any good if we're not ready to receive him. I think what we need to do, at least as I've been reflecting this past week, it can be summed up in something that we heard in the first reading today from the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah says, I rejoice heartily in the Lord. My God is the joy of my soul. And I was reflecting on that and I thought how true that is. My God is the joy of my soul. I know in my own life I'm most at peace with the world around me, with God, with everything, when I place God first. When other things come in, it all goes kaflooey. God is the joy of my soul. But so how often are we tempted to put something else in that blank where God would be? In terms of the statement, God is the joy of my soul, how often we fill that God blank with something else. How would we fill the blank for our own lives right now? Not what you'd like to be, but what you are. What would fill in that blank? Money is the joy of my soul. Success, caffeine, alcohol, some other drug, sex, TV, eating, shopping, clothes, whatever. All those things that crowd in. Would we have to actually say, one of those things is the joy of my soul? That's what gives me the most joy. Well, this Sunday is the time to listen again to the words of John the Baptist and to fill in Isaiah's sentence and that blank with God. I think you'll be happy if you do that. I know I am most at peace when I do. Only then, when you can truly say, God is the joy of my soul, will you be ready to receive him? Will you be truly able to rejoice because your heart and your soul will be full?